everybody, and welcome to another episode of What the Trans.
What the Trans?
Yes, I'm Alex, and I'm with Ashleigh here today. How are you, Ashleigh, on this warm day of hell?
Yeah, God, it is, isn't it? I'm all right though. I'm muddling through. So MS is worse in the heat, which is great. I've been really enjoying that. But as we record this, the next couple of days are slated to be even warmer than today is. So that kind of sucks, having that hanging over my head like the sword of Damocles. But yes, I am basically okay. How about you?
I think I'm doing lovely. Saved some train delays earlier today, but
Yes, indeed.
after baking off, I've been doing pretty good. Yesterday we were at my flat, and it's starting to look like an actual livable environment.
Fancy that.
Still haven't got a toilet, but Pete the plumber.
Pete the plumber? That sounds like Bob the Builder or something, doesn't it?
I know, right? Yeah. Hopefully, I'll have a toilet by the end of this week.
Fingers crossed, yes.
Fingers crossed.
So me and the gals have been getting back into magazines.
Ooh.
And for our American listeners, or indeed Swiss ones, that's not about the things that you put in a gun. Magazines as in the papery things that you buy in train stations. And so we now have a coffee table / gaming box that's just full of magazines on the top. So I've taken up with a subscription to Byline Times, which is very good, very, proper journalism, basically, of the sort that we can only dream of, frankly. I also got a history magazine about the witch hunts, and I thought, okay, this is going to be full of questionable sources, but actually it looks really well researched, and every time I've looked something up that was in the magazine, it's turned out to be true. So I was like, oh, okay, then I'll just shut my mouth. Lexi's kind of her magazines are like tech, so she's probably going to subscribe to one that's specifically about the things you can do with a Raspberry Pi.
Not a cooking book, Glenn.
Not a cooking book. And Nadia's got a subscription to the Fortean Times, which deals with strange phenomena, and a subscription to the Beano. Because why the hell not, really?
Beano. It's been so long. I didn't even know they were still in business, in fact.
Yes, they very much are, and that surprised me too. Yeah, Beano is still in business. I think Dandy's gone. But the thing is, there's familiar characters in the, Dennis the Menace, for example, and Minnie the Minx, but it's implied that their parents were their generation's Dennis the Menace.
Oh,
so
gosh.
Dennis's dad was Dennis the Menace 30 years ago, if that makes sense.
Passing the torch.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've read through a couple of them, and the animation's not as good as it used to be, but equally, I'm not the target audience for it, and I think that's okay. So,
Did they pass on tropes of different generational differences in each of? So it's now got more of a Gen Z sort of spin.
Yeah, it very much does. Yeah, so the Bash Street kids now have a nerdy tech focused student who's in a wheelchair. I was just quite delighted when I flicked through a Beano quite recently. I was like, holy crap, this is actually kind of lovely. It's made me feel nostalgic but also optimistic.
Oh, definitely. Oh, that sounds really cool.
Yeah. I have to check one out next time you're around.
Oh, definitely. I think that'll be coming up soon in August. I think we've got a bit close in at some point for...
Yes, indeed. Our AGM. Sorry, I mean Trans Pride Manchester.
No, definitely. We always... I think I'm always it's either I'm always sleeping on your couch in August, or I think this time we've decided to upgrade things a bit. But
we're gonna get you a hotel, because my couch doesn't fold out into a bed anymore, so it would not be very comfortable for two people to sleep on it. We're gonna get you a hotel. I think. It might not be the best hotel, but it will be a hotel.
CLO's magazine's very much looking forward to reading through them, especially Byline Times, because we've seen some really good headlines from those as well.
Yeah, Byline Times are it's outstanding journalism, properly. And the tagline of the magazine is, what the papers don't say. And yeah, it is. There's articles by Andy Burnham in the edition that I've got. Andy Burnham's the mayor of Manchester. Although it's a bit of a cheat, because the article is basically taken from a speech that he made. And while that's pretty cool that the mayor of Manchester, who is talking about how people want to see changes happen around where they live. Places first, not politics first, is Andy Burnham's ethos. And yeah, good. I think that's really cool. It's a good way of looking at it. And with the improvements that he and Transport for Greater Manchester have made to the Transport for Greater Manchester recently, we've got a whole network now. All the buses are yellow or about to be yellow, the B network. So the trams are yellow, the buses are yellow, and it's been lovely to see. And the transport network is really good now. It was pretty good before, but it's been kind of kicked into high gear, really.
In Essex, I'm jealous, honestly. It's 30 minutes to get from my home village to a local town, and it's on a bus.
I see.
And it's bloody first bus every time.
Ooh, worst bus.
Worst bus, exactly. And then Greater Anglia trains, so you can't even get a London transport to get home. But that's a topic for our Discord channel, What for Trains.
Very good. Didn't see that one coming. Anyway, subscribe to Byline Times, dear listener, or just check out some of their stuff. They have covered some trans-positive stories and done so in a very well-researched, well-written kind of way. So, would recommend. However, there's another thing that I recommend, which is taking some action as we stroll down Action Alley. So what have we got in Action Alley? Well, some of you might know who GIRES are, the Gender Identity Research and Education Society, and you might have your own particular opinions of the people involved and their work, but the fact is they've been trying to educate around trans people for more than 30 years. They've done a tremendous amount of research, and it's all in danger of being lost if GIRES can't continue, which is why they have launched a crowdfunder. Save GIRES.
Save GIRES, yes. Got some really good stuff. So I think the goal's like 10,000. They've raised about $2,000 or something already. So we can raise Good Law Project to hundreds of thousands of pounds. I'm sure we can spare some funds for GIRES to keep that good research.
And even if it's just kept on in an archival sense, we need to kind of contribute or we'll just lose it completely. And that would be a real shame, I think.
Definitely. And speaking of more actions we can take, have you been questioned, stopped or challenged using a single-sex space since the Supreme Court decision? Transaction would like to hear from you. So you can check out their website. There's a little form that you can see where you can submit where you've been challenged or had any issues accessing single-sex toilets to help fight against the Supreme Court ruling and help provide ammunition for trans advocacy organisations to fight the good fight.
Yes, that's a good one, and I'm sure some people have had that experience, tragically. So if you have, Transaction would like to know. Now, we have a bit more of a joyful action here with a bit of what the trans news thrown in. Roll the clip. Clip, 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 clip. Yeah.
Hello, wonderful people. Now, if you are listening to the podcast, which I don't know how else you'd be hearing this dropping right now, if not, unless you broke into the secret underground vaults where we actually put files and things. In which case, if you're there, cheeky, rude, get away. Go. This is not allowed for you. No permission. I'm distracted. Right. Well, anyway, if you're listening to this right now, you may notice that I am not a part of this episode. Fear not. I've not been trapped down a well or shuttled into the further reaches of outer space, as much as that idea sounds quite alluring in these trying times. I'm actually working on something quite exciting, which I will tell you about, only after the following info, which I promise is related, so listen up. In Newcastle, on the 26th of July, there will be a QTI Pride. This is specifically a queer trans intersex pride held from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at 1 Strawberry Lane, Newcastle. Now, as their poster says, it will have workshops, dance, film, stalls, sensory joy, and more. Now, this is being organised by Asani, that is the East and South Asians Northeast, who are a QTI-led community network centering QTI BIPOC community care and intersectional anti-racism. As such, QTI Pride centres QTI BIPOC, which is Black and Indigenous people of colour, while being open to all QTI people and allies. It also has free entry for all. However, they could still use some help. Asani and QTI Pride are unfunded and operate via mutual aid. And whilst they have a lot to offer on the day already, they have posted a call out for some things to help make the day extra successful. So please go and look at the specific information on their pinned post on Instagram that we will link to. It's esa.ne, but we'll link to it, so that you can then find out how to help best. They are open for more stalls, stewards. There will be a free clothes area and free community information stalls. So please bring anything to donate to either of these, be it your zine or some old dysphoric clothes. I know that they also are, I think, opening up for contributions for a fundraiser for a community member who is in need of emergency funds, things like, art or services, things like that can be sold to get more funds for Hussam. The juicy final tidbit is I will be running a workshop and a stall at the event. I've been very honoured to be invited into this space. I've seen firsthand how much work and effort they're putting in, and how much help from other groups as well, like Sister Shack. It's very real community vibes. So if you can, pop down. But please be mindful. Just I'm not saying this because I think anyone is going to be like this, but it's due diligence. If I don't, sod's law. Just be mindful. It's not a What the Trans meetup. I am just there to help encourage more trans people to consider writing and to let folks know that we exist. But if you do want to come collect a card or a sticker and say hey, then the green bean may be seen there. So yeah, that's me out. Bye.
So since I've had chance to listen to that little recording that you have heard and Alex hasn't, the Queer Trans Intersex Pride on Saturday 26th of July 2025 sounds great, right? Literally just the flyer. Workshops, dance, film, stalls, sensory joy and more. Fabulous stuff, and I really hope that Flint's session goes really well. Genuinely. Because that sounds like it'll be a really good one, and I'm sure they'll do a smashing job.
Yeah, it's something to check out. It'll be a fantastic experience. Flint's always brilliant at doing public speaking and such, and running workshops. They'll definitely be smashing it. So excited to see how that comes along.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. Yeah.
It's time. It's for the news. Oh no. Oh. I like that we have that sound effect just in the soundboard now for so we can hear it while we're recording.
Yeah, for those who don't know, we're recording this session on our on a Discord channel, and I borrow the soundboard from our What the Trans Discord server where all our stings are.
Get those jumping legs ready because it's time to pond hop.
Pond hop it.
Have you got that one on the soundboard?
Oh yes, I do.
Pond hopping, we're hopping across the pond.
Oh bloody hell, that's loud.
How bad could it be?
So, you may have heard about Leah Thomas. She's trans and was on the swimming team of the University of Pennsylvania up until 2022, when she won a National Collegiate Athletics Association or NCAA swimming title. But nothing good can last, and the university have now altered 3 different records held by Thomas and given them to the CIFS athletes who finished second, claiming that they had been disadvantaged by Thomas being a part of the swimming team. This came about thanks to the Trump administration's push to completely remove trans athletes from girls' and women's sports, with the department concluding that the university had violated the rights of female athletes by allowing Thomas to participate. Within a day or two of the university's announcement, Thomas had been deleted from any pages showing her as a winner and the other athletes she apparently victimised in her place. In a statement, the University of Pennsylvania, President J. Larry Jameson, sounds like J. Jonah Jameson or something, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, Spider-Man, page 1 with a decent picture this time. Move Conway to page 7.
There's a problem with page 7.
And make it page 8 and give him 10% off.
Okay.
Make it 5%.
That can't be done.
Get out of here!
But he said, while Penn's policies during the 2021 to 2022 swim season were in accordance with the NCAA eligibility rules at the time, we acknowledge that some student athletes were disadvantaged by these rules. For fuck's sake. We recognise this and will apologise to those who experienced a competitive disadvantage or experienced anxiety because of the policies in effect at the time. Back in February, the Education Department asked the NCAA and the National Federation of State High School Associations, or SHSA to restore any titles, awards and records it says may have been, quote, misappropriated by biological males competing in the female categories.
Ooh, scary. Yeah, so what did you make of it? It's just so petty, isn't it?
It's just so stupid. I mean, I was reading this while I was in the Uber ride home, and like I was irritated reading it, but then reading it again out loud just gives a second set of realization at how petty and ridiculous and utterly just childish their approach to this is.
Call it what it is. It's erasure, right? They're trying to erase trans people who've done anything, who've achieved anything, whose names might be out there in public, right? They're trying to kind of paint that over and invisibilize trans people. Pretending we don't exist makes it then easier to tighten the screws in other ways.
Yeah, pretending we don't exist, and then also pretending we have a biological advantage, even though when we spoke to key scientists who study in this area, say, no, that's bullshit.
Yeah, so trans people are simultaneously too invisible to win anything, but also too much of a threat. I mean, if we look at the example of Leah Thomas, she won a record, but she won it by, like, tenths of a second. If she had this apparent biological male reputed advantage, surely she'd have won it by, you know, a yard and a half kind of thing. Because according to this lot, according to the Trump administration and the people who follow and believe in them, any man at all is automatically better at sports than any woman. So
Stupid.
yeah, fuck 'em. Yeah, it is. It's stupid, it's petty, and it's what's in charge over there, unfortunately. And better worry about that sort of thing getting the top spot a little bit closer to home, but that's something for us to worry about in the run-up to the next election. In slightly lighter news, North Carolina Governor Josh Stein has vetoed bills going after diversity, equity and inclusion policies and trans rights, calling them, quote, mean-spirited. Specifically, he vetoed Senate Bill 227, which focused on aspects of K-12 education, Senate Bill 558, which was specifically about schools and community colleges administered by the University of North Carolina, House Bill 171, which was about state and local government agencies, and finally, House Bill 805, which did a few things, but contained certain anti-trans provisions, as well as giving parents more rights in challenging school library books. Stein said, quote, at a time when teachers, law enforcement and state employees need pay rises and people need shorter lines at the DMV, the legislature failed to pass a budget and instead wants to distract us by stoking culture wars that further divide us. These mean-spirited bills would marginalise vulnerable people and also undermine the quality of public services and public education. Therefore, I am vetoing them. I stand ready to work with the legislature when it gets serious about protecting people and addressing people from North Carolina, their pressing concerns. So, nice one. Good work, Josh Stein. Approved.
Yeah, well done, Josh.
He's right, isn't he? Because it is just a distraction. It's like we're going to make your lives materially worse, but we're going to blame everything on immigrants and trans people and the woke agenda.
So, oh, look, we're incompetent. Look, over there, trans people. Because they, like, a budget for... And then they want to focus on... Yeah.
That's easy for you to say.
No, it's me just processing it. It's just, oh, look, there's a whole important budget bill, but then they put the trans bill first?
Yeah, so they didn't pass a budget, but they did pass some bills going after DEI and going after trans people, because that's really important, apparently. Keeping it international, let's go to Iran. So we need to preface this story by saying that we feel there's a certain amount of uncertainty surrounding it. As we'll get into, all of the involved parties have some pretty solid reasons to lie about what happened, but there's some question marks over why they would bother to do so, like whose interests are served by lying about it. And just a quick content warning for this story, it does mention the death of a number of trans people, so if you're not in a place where you can listen to that, please skip ahead to the time code you're about to be given.
23 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is to do with the recent Israeli strikes on Iran. In one of them, a place called Evin Prison was hit and by all accounts very badly damaged. Even dissidents against the Iranian regime have criticised the strike, pointing out the fact that it took place at noon on a workday, all but ensured the prison would be full of admin workers, medical staff, lawyers and visitors. In fact, according to Siamak Namazi, an Iranian-American man who was held at Evin Prison for years on charges that human rights groups considered to be bogus, said that, quote, "What I hear from prisoners and my friends there is that they feel stuck between the two blades of a scissors, the evil regime that imprisons and tortures them, and a foreign force dropping bombs on their heads in the name of freedom." So why are we talking about this? Tucked away in the coverage is the claim that, according to Reza Shafhaka, a human rights lawyer, around 100 transgender inmates are missing and presumed dead after their section of the prison was completely destroyed. That's a missing presumed dead that stands apart from the 71 confirmed fatalities, and a reminder that that phrase is so often a coded way of saying we don't know where they are and we're not going to bother looking. If this is true, and 100 trans people have been killed by this one strike, that would make it the largest single mass killing of trans people in all of history, according to the American law, gender and tech writer Alejandro Carabella. Worth pointing out, people aren't arrested in Iran for being trans as such, but there are no protections for them under the law, and there's often like trumped up charges against trans people who are just trying to live their lives. So a policeman will stop a trans person to talk to them and then will make up them resisting arrest, even though the only thing they're being arrested for is resisting arrest. So they're very, very heavily discriminated against and criminalised and now killed thanks to the Iranian regime. So what did you think of this?
Fuck the IDF. Jesus.
Oh, yeah, I mean, obviously fuck the IDF.
And I mean, goodness, it's just absolutely...
Yeah, it boggles the mind, doesn't it? These people who are innocent, who've been kind of snatched off the streets, bunged in a prison where conditions are awful,
and then murdered,
and then killed by Israel. Yeah, exactly. And like, why were they shooting at a prison? What were they shooting at if it wasn't a prison, kind of thing? What did they hope to achieve by that strike if their weapons are so accurate as we are led to believe?
Yes, they know exactly which part of the prison they want to bomb to as well.
I've seen people theorising about that, and I'm not sure if that level of granular control over missiles is possible. And if so, why would you aim for the trans people, right?
No, exactly. I suppose there's lots of different information coming about on those bits of specifics, so we can't really comment too much on those ones. I'm afraid we're going to have to move on from this story. Now we're landing back in the UK in our hopping, in which we're now at Kent, where the reform members of the Kent County Council have been angrily tweeting about the presence of trans material in the children's section of a local library. Reform councillors have publicly announced that they called for all trans books to be removed from all children's sections in all Kent libraries. Shocking demands that have rightly been met with protests both from trans people and librarians. Digging a little deeper, the specific book which started all of Reform's outrage, the Autistic Trans Guide to Life, had never been in the children's section, but instead was part of a Pride Month display at the entrance to a library. And by the time the drama hit Twitter, Pride Month was already over. The outraged councillors had not attended KCC meetings on library policy, so their demands have not changed any library policy. We understand that KCC has issued a reminder to staff on existing policy. Children are not and will not be exposed to adult transgender literature in our libraries. Presumably, there's still plenty age-appropriate LGBTQ content available in the children's sections, as there should be.
It's such a British thing, right, to kind of like make up a problem and then get angry about it. They're saying, oh, look at all this adult trans material in the kids section. It's like, well, that's not what it was, and that's not where it was. But okay. but they're kind of tacking towards the thing that American conservatives do so often, which is anything LGBTQ related, anything with any kind of LGBTQ plus themes is considered pornographic by them. No, kids can't be learning about that. That's just pornographic. And I kind of think that's where Reform are going. Bear in mind, the leader of Reform was quoted this week saying that he thinks gay marriage is wrong. So that's definitely who they are and where they are going.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You know, we can't let these people win.
No, definitely. We need to fight them as hard as possible here, because they need to know that at the start we're not going to give them any ground to stand on, really. This is the thin edge of a wedge of Reform trying to cause problems, and we need to oppose them as early as possible and to make sure that it's as hard as possible. And if they fail miserably here, it provides bad press, and if the bad press for them keeps going, it's a very good way to fight this fascism, because the people who are opposing this library ban are fighting fascism right now. Pure and simple. If you're an anti-fascist, you need to just be here helping fight whatever this, is happening here, because anyone who's a Reform councillor or member is just a fascist, in my opinion.
No, I'm not even gonna disagree or dispute what you're saying. It's just true. Christo-fascist nonsense. All right. Moving on then. Okay. So, just in case you thought we could have a whole episode and not talk about the EHRC, at the last minute along comes Baroness Faulkner with a steel chair. Remember that session a few weeks ago where Faulkner was meeting with the Women and Equalities Committee and they grilled the fuck out of her? Well, something we pointed out at the time was Faulkner's claim that the EHRC has an 81% approval rating, which seemed, suspicious as hell, right? Where did she get that number? Was anybody actually polled about this, and if so, whom? Well, spoiler alert, but nobody.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Heather Herbert posted out on Blue Sky that she'd submitted a Freedom of Information request about where that number came from. She quoted Faulkner in her question when she said, "But people who thought positively about us were in the region of 35%. They're currently 81%. And Heather said, "That figure of 81% is surprising to me, therefore I would like to know which survey is she citing? And if this survey is internal to the EHRC and has not been completed by a well-regarded third party, what criteria were used to recruit the participants in this survey? What methodology was used to ensure that the participants were representative of the wider community? And what percentage of LGBT plus people thought positively about the EHRC?" Now, the EHRC response was, "We have since written to the Women and Equalities Committee to clarify that the figures quoted by Baroness Faulkner refer to our media sentiment analysis, which measures the tone and favourability of media coverage about EHRC, not public opinion polling in terms of methodology. Our external media monitoring provider provides sentiment analysis of media coverage which mentions the EHRC. It uses artificial intelligence to deliver automated real-time insights about the tone of earned media coverage." So, an AI told them. A fucking AI told them that the media actually loves them. Look, it even gave us a number. So even if that's accurate, which is a big if, well, let's just run with it for a second, it's worth pointing out the way the psychotically right-wing media feels about you says a lot. So if they quite like what you're doing, I'd argue the EHRC is doing something wrong. Now, making matters worse, our old friends TAC submitted their own FOI request, which asked about the 81% approval rating question among many other things, and uncovered even more evidence of institutional capture by the anti-trans lot. Part of their response to TAC says the following: "Alongside the full public consultation, we have sought to meet a range of parties following the Supreme Court judgment in For Women Scotland Limited versus Scottish Ministers in relation to the consultation and proposed revisions." So, why don't you have a guess about that range of parties? Ready? Here it comes. The LGB Alliance, Sex Matters, For Women Scotland, Merched Cymru, the Labour Women's Declaration, Women Uniting, and Fair Play for Women. So, not a particularly big range of parties, was it?
You see, the thing is, you have spoken to the wrong expert. You've got to ask the right expert.
These organisations are described as organisations representing people with the protected characteristics of sex, sexual orientation, and gender reassignment. But I'd argue that with the LGB Alliance and Sex Matters on board, misrepresenting gender reassignment would be nearer the mark. Given how few actually LGB people are members of those organisations, they barely represent sexual orientation either. As we've said before, the EHRC is no longer fit for purpose and should be seen as an occupying organisation and not one which can be reformed. Personally, I'd rather see it destroyed and replaced root and branch, and I'm sure that mindset is already being used to suggest that some people on the left are anti-equality. No, I'm just an anti-fascist, which in this time and place means opposing the EHRC. What a time to be alive!
What a time to be alive.
I saw this today and was immediately like, right, for fuck's sake, I'm going to have to add this in now. So,
well, I gave you some extra time to write it. So when I saw Faulkner give those figures out in the Women's Equality panel, I was like, well, the fuck did she pull those? Faulkner just pulled those right out her arse, and it seems she did. The plagiarism machine, the hallucination machine.
The lying machine said the papers love you, right? So that's what she asked. Not a poll or anything. She didn't go to YouGov or anything to test people's reactions to the EHRC. No, she asked the lying machine to it, and it lied to her, I assume.
Yeah, and gave her a little handy score as well. Bloody EHRC. It's just a fucking mess.
It is, yeah. Well, they're an occupying force, really. You might even go so far as to describe them as an enemy organisation, which they kind of are. Yeah,
and I suppose you can consider them an institutionally captured. And when you 100%. Look at the latest Sullivan review and how institutionally captured that is, we want to cast our minds back to part 2 of this as well, which would at first seem institutionally captured, but that's got a question mark on it in a way of how much of an institutional capture there is. But we'll go into that momentarily. So, all the way back in March this year, we covered the Sullivan Review, aka the review of data, statistics, and research on sex and gender. You can go back and listen to episodes 127 and 128 if you want, but it's not necessary. The review's author, Professor Alice Sullivan, is a member of Sex Matters Advisory Group, and she was also a speaker at the first LGB Alliance conference. If you don't win any prizes for guessing what perspectives came across in her work. Anyway, Sullivan promised a second report would happen, and a miserable thing has finally arrived. Weirdly, it's not on the government's website like part 1. Instead, part 2 is on a site managed by Sullivan herself, which is interesting. We've asked the government if it plans to publish part 2 on its own website, and the response we've had so far has been about academic freedom and about Sullivan part 1. Maybe eventually we'll hear it in due course, but for now at least, part 2 has less gravitas than part 1. So, in any case, the sequel to the Sullivan Review is even more shoddy and blatantly biased than the original. If we had time, we would probably spend hours critiquing the 432-page behemoth. It offers some 20 recommendations, a significant proportion of which are criticising the existence of equity, diversity and inclusion policies, unless it's specifically about protecting the rights of gender-critical people. It's lopsided in the extreme, and let's have a quick-fire summary of a few. In recommendation 3, those who limit gender-critical speech should be appropriately punished. Recommendation 4, those who feel unsafe around people with gender-critical views should be told to learn to deal with the exposure to different viewpoints. Recommendation 8, universities should not display pride flags or have pride lanyards. These are political and make gender-critical people feel uncomfortable. Recommendation 9, EDI practices should not accommodate contested political views, like pronouns. Sullivan takes a position where she insists trans people do not face barriers to inclusion at academic events. Apparently, only gender-critical people do. Sullivan also cites in her appendix a 2022 conference on gender in education, which could not find any trans people willing to take part in a panel debate on gender identity. The organisers have arranged a replacement panel titled A Contested View in Conversation with Alice Sullivan. This example was included in the Sullivan's appendix because there was a hostile commentary on Twitter on this day of the conference, and after she hosted her panel, an open letter was written to the event organisers. As for the original research done in this report to justify Sullivan's recommendations, it's a survey of 130 people off Twitter. In fairness, some respondents, particularly the trans ones, may have come from elsewhere, but I suspect it was mostly her Twitter followers. Survey responses are also presented in a lopsided way. The gender-critical ones are always quoted in full where possible. One question, answered by Kathleen Stock, takes up an uninterrupted 5 pages. And it's not even the longest direct quote in the report. Meanwhile, although trans-supportive responses do get quoted, a significant proportion instead gets summarised as just bullet points, and in one case Sullivan wholly dismisses the answers from trans-supportive people as not relevant. So yeah, Sullivan too is biased and infuriating, and I hope it doesn't make it to the government's websites.
Yup, same. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm lovely.
Yes, you sound delighted.
The bullshit nearly killed me.
Okay. And it's so obviously bullshit, and it's so obviously hypocritical, right? She says universities shouldn't display pride flags or have pride lanyards, which are political and make gender-critical people feel uncomfortable. In the same recommendations, like 4 recommendations down from saying that people who feel unsafe around people with gender-critical views should be told to learn to deal with exposure to different viewpoints. Like, which is it?
Yeah.
It's obvious that she only wants to protect gender-critical speech at the expense of everybody else.
No, exactly. It's utterly hypocritical. And when they say they shouldn't accommodate contested views, gender-critical ideology is a contested view. But they're just obsessed with their bigotry being accommodated at the same time. And it's no matter that there's what looks to be hesitancy in the government in not publishing a report that has so many holes that it wouldn't even it's just shit. And by the way, thank you for Sammy for wading through this. Patience of a fucking saint.
Yeah.
On this one.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I tried and just got so annoyed with it. I was just like, no, I'm going to go work on something else. So I wrote some other stories. Sammy wrote this one in its entirety, and applause. Like, many props. We love you, Sammy. Thank you. Mwah.
Yeah. And it went above and beyond with contact the government about the publishing situation. This is still an ongoing thing, so expect more from us in the future.
It is, and there's some kind of interesting side notes to that, but we can't really get into those right now because the government haven't confirmed certain things with us, if that makes sense. But more on that next time. Normally at this point we would indeed do a Loser's Corner. Loser's Corner. However, we're structuring things a little differently this time, because we're going to kind of smoosh Loser's Corner and the meat together. Loser's Corner. Because the loser, who we wish to highlight, is very much part of the meat.
So this one's a very exciting meet or special episode. I think this is going to be a whole thing over 2 weeks, but we're going to be going over the Green Party elections.
Well, and the Green Party in general, I think, because there's some history. I know there's a lot of concern with trans people about the Green Party and about, well, I'd vote for them, but they're really transphobic. I think Some, but perhaps not all of that has been ameliorated and has been dealt with. But that's for the interviewees we've got to talk about. And obviously the main one, the big one that you'll probably have seen in the episode description is, of course, that we've spoken to Zach Polanski, who's one of the candidates for the Green Party's top job. And he's really cool. Basically, we spoke to him and he came across really well in the interview. And that was great. I enjoyed it.
So we'll be getting to that in a little bit as well. So given how long everything is, we might as well jump right into it.
Just jump straight in, yeah.
So the Green Party election is coming soon. And up until the 31st of July, if you join the Green Party, you will be eligible to vote for who will lead it. This election comes at a vital time, with Reform booming in the polls and Labour failing. People will be looking for an alternative. We spoke to multiple candidates for the party who are pushing their ideas on how the Green Party can be that alternative. In the main leadership bid, we have two candidates. On one side is the current incumbent, Adrian Ramsey, and his co-leader Ellie Chowns, a pair looking to push a more centrist viewpoint inside of the party. And on the other side of the ring is the current deputy leader Zach Polanski, a candidate who is looking to push more to the left and is keen to champion a platform of eco-populism. And we'll be speaking to Zach about his leadership campaign in this episode. Also, we're going to be speaking to two candidates who are hoping to be deputy leader of the party, Annie Townsend and Ash Roof, the two trans candidates in the election, in the next episode. And they have some very interesting campaigns. There is a lot to go over, so before we jump into the interview of Zach, we're going to go over how things currently look for trans people in the Green Party, their policies, how they've dealt with and are currently dealing with transphobia inside of the party.
Now, it is important to state that as part of the Green Party constitution, leaders cannot decide policy or change it. That's always decided in their conferences. So what's decided at the conference is settled, and that cannot be changed by the leaders. So if one leader wanted to scrap their policies on being nice to trans people, they can't. Only the members can do that. And as a party leader, they need to back these positions. They can't hide behind anything. That's the policies of their party. Anything else is just lying to the public about their party's policy. So what are these policies? Now, the first part of that is the policy on the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. The Green Party is still in support, something that is becoming disappointingly rare these days. But following that, they have numerous policies on pushing for protections for intersex rights. With trans rights specifically, they support self-ID for gender recognition. They want to remove the spousal veto and a push for non-binary, genderqueer and third gender folk to be recognised. They want to improve the process of medical transition to remove barriers to doing it. And in an upcoming motion in their next conference, it will be pushing for trans care to be provided by primary care, like going to your GP instead of going through the GIC system. Now, the list goes on and on. Obviously, we'll link to their policy document in our description, but most people see that the Green Party's policies on trans rights are usually pretty solid, and it's usually the politics inside the party that is the biggest barrier, and we will be examining that.
Indeed, and one of the biggest stories that came from internal divisions inside the party is the split of the Scottish Greens and the England and Wales Green Party. Now, there was a lot of lead up to this, but in order to understand it, we will need to get you introduced to a certain Green Party activist, who as of time of writing is just an activist, because he got the boot this year, and you may have seen this person's name in Loser's Corner a couple of times, and can you guess it? Can you? It's Shirar Ali.
Yeah, roll the jingle.
Loser's Corner.
So, this guy used to be a deputy leader in 2014 to 2016, and in 2015 signed a statement with the Green Party leadership condemning a parliamentary candidate, Rupert Reid, for saying that trans women were a sort of opt-in version of what it means to be a woman. Which is utterly bizarre, and given his reputation for future, this was a surprise when we first researched this. So, in 2018, he made a run for leadership and lost, and it seems shortly after losing that vote, you can see him going on the grift train. In 2020, Schrar angled for a leadership bid and midway through the campaign released a statement titled "What is a Woman?" and then got last place in that election. He then tried to get a nomination for the Green Party's London mayoral nomination and lost that too. In June 2021, he was appointed as the Green Party spokesperson, which then led to a member of one of the party's working groups resigning due to Alyx's appointment and mentioned Alyx specifically as part of their reason why. In July, Sian Berry, leader at the time, decided not to stand as leader in the next leadership election, citing an unspecified spokesperson's appointment sending mixed messages around trans rights. We can only guess at who that would be. In 2021, he angled for leadership again and lost again. And in February 2022, it was announced that he'd been removed as spokesperson for the Green Party, something he would sue the party over. And then in 2025, he has now been expelled from the Green Party, something that took 4 years to do.
Yeah. You'll love to see it. Okay, so that should be enough background on Ali. But following his suspension, tensions continue to grow between the Green Party of England and Wales and the Scottish Greens. And in this non-comprehensive list, here are the events in 2022 that led to the split between the Scottish and the England and Wales. In July 2022, Shira Ali posted out a tweet attacking Stonewall, saying that people who affirmed trans kids' existence were a danger to children. Afterwards, holding a badge saying "We are Stonewall" in a post, Scottish Green leader Patrick Harvey put out a tweet saying all political parties must do more to challenge this prejudice, including Greens. This clearly must involve expelling members who undermine LGBTQ+ equality. So you can certainly see the implication on that one. Meanwhile, tensions between the Green Party of England and Wales and the Scottish Greens were growing. On October 1st, days before the split, Alison Teal, an election candidate for the Green Party in Sheffield, endorsed an article written about Eddie Izzard which attacked Eddie Izzard for going to the bathroom, something she described as powerful, which then led to an article on the 12th of October which said that members of the Sheffield Green Party refused to campaign for Alison over her comments, saying, "I am a Sheffield Green Party member and I support trans rights. I will not campaign for any candidate who discriminates against trans people." Now, calls were now coming to sack Teal as a candidate and calls for her suspension started as well. 4 days later, on the 16th of October, with the culmination of all the incidents with transphobia all over the whole 3 years from Shira Ali to Alison Teal and others, the Scottish Green Party disaffiliated from the England and Wales Party, the details of which we're about to go over. Then 9 days after the split, Alison Teal was placed on a no-fault suspension, an action that looked to many that the disciplinary system should have come sooner. Teal then left the party shortly before more action could be taken against her. There are more anti-trans activists in the group that we haven't mentioned, but unfortunately we just haven't got the time to go into the more granular details, so they're probably not going to be mentioned. But they are there, which kind of sucks, obviously. So we'll take a break for a moment here. What do you make of all of this when you're researching it and writing it up, Alex?
There was a lot of stuff that was going on, honestly, and
Lots of back and forth.
No, definitely, and trying to, and we were having some trouble trying to fit everything in, and
yes.
So there's a lot of stuff that we haven't mentioned, but tried to stick to what's essential. But you can clearly see a lot of procedural failures in how they were trying to take on Ali. I was absolutely surprised about the 2015 statement that Ali did. Considered.
Well, he's got on the grift train at some point, hasn't he?
No, definitely. He started to realise he was losing relevance and stuck onto what he could. So,
yeah.
As we mentioned earlier, we weren't able to cover all of the events that happened in 2022, but suffice to say, if you were a trans person inside the party, you would have a considerable amount of concern over how the party was dealing with transphobia coming from inside of the house. Eventually, the members of the Scottish Greens had enough of it. As mentioned, in October, in a motion at their autumn conference in 2022, they split. And we'll go over what was in that motion, and we'll explain why we needed all of that preamble. In a motion, it read, "In recent years, we have seen office bearers of the Green Party of England and Wales engage in transphobic rhetoric and conduct. This includes a former official spokesperson submitting motions deemed competent by the relevant Green Party in England Wales body that would deny trans people gender-affirming healthcare, ignore our independence as a party, and would seek to legislate in devolved competencies." This was a line referring to an office bearer inside of the party. Now, this motion didn't name who it was, but in that quote it mentioned submitting a specific motion, and that can be traced back to a specific motion by Ashleigh Ali, who submitted a motion calling for a ban on a particular private medical firm that provided gender-affirming care. Now, there's a mention of motions that ignored our independence party, which we weren't sure if this was a reference to Ali, but we wouldn't be surprised if it was. In the Scottish Greens motion, it made clear that they weren't happy that the Green Party body deemed that the motion was competent and worthy of appearing at the conference, so also shown fault with the body who allowed it through, not just Ali. So following that, it says, GPEW office bearers and an unelected legislator have insulted our party and sought to damage our reputation regarding LGBT plus rights, women's rights and child protection issues. Disciplinary action has been lethargic, ineffective and inconsistent, and in response we must take this action. Now, as we've seen, an unelected legislator whose disciplinary action was lethargic, ineffective and inconsistent reminds us of Alison Teal, and with the close proximity to the events of her comments and her disciplinary, seems too close to not be a coincidence. So, in this motion, it clearly implies both Ashleigh Ali and Alison Teal to be primary reasons for their departure, two people now not in the party. So, the last bit of this is also important. The suspension of this association will remain in effect until such time that action is taken that satisfies the membership of the Scottish Green Party through conference or SGP Council to address both issues of transphobia and respect for the Scottish Green Party, our independence as a party, and the devolution settlement. And that's the end of the motion.
Phew. Okay. Yeah. We made it through. We made it through this bit at least. Recognise we've just laid a bunch of stuff on you, but that's why the split happened. Literally, that's it. It was cited as a reason why was the transphobia.
Exactly, and you can easily trace back exactly what they were talking about all the way through, and clearly cited that there was failures inside of the party, not just from the people who were spouting the stuff together, but the people who had to put the procedures in place to deal with this person wasn't dealing with the problem.
Well, as the Scottish Greens said, it was just ineffective, wasn't it? They weren't using the procedures that were there. And Alison Teal wasn't kicked out of the party as Ali was. She just left because she could see which way the wind was blowing. But even then with her, a no-fault suspension. What are you talking about, no fault? Right? She was suspended for a particular reason because she said something stupid. That's not no fault. That is, candidates' own actions.
To be fair, I think for that particular one, it's sort of that's the automatic one that they can just do if, there's something we're investigating, we're just going to suspend you while we're investigating.
Oh, I see.
And then when we've gone over stuff, we'll look into more of a suspension/expulsion.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
So more of a procedural thing.
The fact that they are actively getting rid of anti-trans members like Ashleigh Ali, like Devulapalli, or Winda Devulapalli, I think is her name, whose name wasn't in our big block of text we just read you, but she was, again, somebody was an anti-trans voice within the Green Party.
Should be coming soon.
Oh, right.
Don't worry, it's only quick, fortunately.
Yeah, thankfully. It's unlikely to repair trust all by itself, though, right? The disciplinary proceedings, they're handled outside of leadership, but, perhaps a culture change with new leadership could be an avenue to improve this, to kind of, mend fences with the Scottish Greens and rejoin together, if that's what the Scottish Greens want to do. Now, it's been almost 3 years since this happened, and questions are now raised as to whether the Green Party has improved in regards to procedure, and a good test on this is the latest expulsion for the Green Party, Pallavi Devulapalli. who I just mentioned, and I wish I'd read ahead in the script. So with this, we need to jump 2 years into the future to June 2024. Devulapalli was a Green spokesperson and was selected as a candidate for the general election. Sound familiar? It's clear that in April 2024, Devulapalli did express support for the caste review prior to the general election and held a panel with other anti-trans ex-members of the Green Party in December of 2023. So the party knew about her positions and still selected her. But the main thing that really brought her to the spotlight for her transphobia was in a hustings event during the election. She responded to a question asking about what they would do to help the trans community feel safe amid an enormous increase in hate crimes. But her response was, I think there's something mischievous in the air to make this out to be an issue when really I've yet to meet anyone, and denied that there is such a thing as an anti-trans hate crime. Then in July, a complaint was made regarding Pallavi's conduct, and in September of that year, after the election, she was suspended. Following an 8-month investigation, was then expelled from the party. Now you can check out the full details of this in episode 115 in her first appearance in Losers Corner. Now that beats the previous record of 4 years, with complaints originally starting in 2021 with Shara Ali. But questions do need to be raised at how her transphobia got past the people who vetted her before she became a party candidate, especially with how public her views were at the time.
It's sort of interesting to see those things. All the shitstorm that happened to Shara Ali was something 2 years ago, but this one happened early last year. In fact, a year ago, if almost, in this case, because it's June 2025. And it's interesting to see about, because when it came to Alison Teal and her transphobia, she was fairly visible about that before she got selected as a candidate, and the selections for candidate process clearly needs improvement if she was able to do that. So we need to see some clear changes to the candidacy selection process to weed out those who are transphobic, because I think that is a clear process that needs to be changed in the Green Party.
And in the same way that you'd hope their selection processes weed out people who are misogynistic and racist and all the other things that, a person can be, but, this transphobia, slipped through and resulted in her suspension and dismissal. So, good. So fingers crossed they can absolutely speed run the next one.
I think we'll let you all look at that and absorb it and sort of make your own minds about their suspension process. And of course, as time will go, we'll see how the next candidates, see how Green Party approaches it, especially with the election. So I suppose we might as well, speaking of candidate stuff, let's do it. Let's do it. Election. So, as we said, we have 2 sets of candidates for leadership. So let's focus on them, and more specifically, their platform on trans rights. First up is Adrian Ramsey. Now, Adrian was first elected as deputy leader back in 2008, and in 2021 became co-leader with Carla Denyer. He remained very quiet on trans rights, and in 2022, despite his co-leaders signing an open letter objecting to the EHRC forcing biological sex to the definition of sex in the Equality Act, Adrian was not present in the letter. However, it should be noted that Caroline Lucas didn't either. When pressed on whether trans people should be excluded from single-sex spaces, he said this: "Under current legislation, there are circumstances where service providers can make judgments on a case-by-case basis, and prisons is an example of that, where safeguarding decisions are made that way." And you can see the prison policies recently. So, following this, in an interview with BBC 5 Live in September 2024, he called Devulapalli a valued colleague, and then under questioning from Stephen Nolan, refused to answer the buzzword question of, is a trans woman a woman question, despite it clearly being a Green Party stance that trans women are women. There are more details from this interview, but it's not too encouraging. And to move forward on these comments, we have to move forward towards another year to 2025 and a Supreme Court ruling where it refused to answer the usual as a trans woman or woman question again. He also said that the Supreme Court ruling brought clarity, in stark contrast to his co-leader, Carla Denyer, who made sure to reject the ruling and speak out against it.
But this time, Adrian's comments led the Young Greens group to put out a statement regarding this, saying that in Green Party policy, trans women are women, trans men are men, and non-binary identities are valid, and said they were disappointed in his response. In May, Carla Denyer resigned as co-leader and the election for party leaders began. Now, this is where we need to address the elephant in the room. We managed to get Zach Polanski in for an interview, but not Adrian or Ellie. We tried. We arranged a date, Alex booked a day off work so they'd be available, gave them plenty of notice, and they cancelled claiming they were busy. We tried to rearrange and we just kept getting messed around. We are usually really patient with folks when it comes to arranging interviews. We try and be as flexible as possible, but when they are running a professional election campaign, it looked more like cowardly avoiding a potentially tough interview than being genuinely busy. So we will let you, the audience, reflect on that. But then that leads us to Zach Polanski, current Green Party deputy leader, member of the London Assembly, and I think in this case we will let Zach speak for himself in our interview with him. So roll the tape. Interview. Zach Polanski, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's good. We've got some good questions for you, I think, and we'll start off with. So you've made the decision not to run as part of a co-leader, so there's just you as the leader rather than as to, have a running mate as well. What prompted that decision?
Yeah, so it would be really easy for me to challenge the idea of a co-leadership model, because I know lots of people don't like it, and I hear constantly that the party just needs one leader. But I'm not going to do that, actually, because I think job sharing is important, and I would actually defend the co-leadership model more generally. I do think it's right that the media struggle with it, and I do think it holds us back, but I don't think that's a reason to let go of it. I think, if I'd had a running mate and I thought this is the right combination for the party, I still would have done that. So I'm not critical of anyone actually who runs in a co-leadership model. I think it's important to defend different ways of doing politics. The reason why I'm running on my own, though, is because I want to extend the platform of our elected spokespeople. So if I'm elected on a sole ticket, that means we get 2 deputy leaders. And I think that's really exciting for the party to both increase the diversity of the voices that are speaking for us. I'm not going to be endorsing anyone, but I guess what I would say is that, I hope that we'll see people from the north apply, people from Wales, so places that have not been so well represented in the party should get that say. And I think also, I looked around and I think the deputy leader role is a really good space, as I've discovered, to hone the craft, to get better, to get more visibility without jumping straight into kind of a leadership position, which obviously comes with a lot more responsibility. So it just felt like the right time at the moment to run on my own and to push this argument that we can get 2 new deputy leaders. So you've got a brand new team of 3, all 3 of which I hope will be part of the next group of MPs that we send to Westminster.
No, exactly. And I suppose for your campaign, you're running on a platform of eco-populism as well. So could you explain what you mean by that and your vision of eco-populism?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is I know lots of people don't like the word populism, and I get it because I used to bristle from it too. And it's a bit like the word patriotism. I think the right have kind of owned it. And so those of us who aren't on the right and are on the left kind of go, we don't like those words, so we move away from it. And I think where we can, where we have the spoons to do so, or where we have the ability to do so, we should push back against that and start to reclaim these words back. So for me, the populism of Farage, and sorry to mention his name so early on in the podcast, but
at least it's not J.K. Rowling.
Well, we just don't go near that name. Is ultimately, he's telling very powerful stories. They're stories that I massively disagree with. I think they're stories that are dangerous, and I think they're toxic and divisive. And they're also lies and misinformation. So that's his version of populism. What I do think, though, is we need a populism on the left, which is the powerful storytelling, which is based in science, data, research, and information. So Farage and the right are playing politics on easy mode. They don't need to speak the truth. They can just make up things that sound intuitive to people, or things that resonate with people easily, even if they're just not true. And I'm sure we'll get onto this in a moment, because I think a lot of that affects our LGBT community, and particularly trans people, where something can sound innocuous or not that threatening and just sensible, and people just accept it, and that grows bigger, as opposed to what I think we need to do, which is find powerful stories that are not always easy to tell, but they're the stories that need to be told. So for me, populism is recognizing that if people need food on the table, heat in their homes, and need to hold down a job or get a job, then those are the things they're worried about, and not necessarily the climate crisis. We know that the climate crisis exacerbates these problems, because for those people who are most struggling to put heat in their homes or food on the plate, they're the people who get hit hardest by the unfairness and inequality in our society. But I don't think that's the first place you go. I think the first place you go is to recognize concerns that people already care about, work on those. That doesn't mean rejecting or not caring about everything else. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You really need to care about those things, but you need to link them to everyday concerns.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much for that. So moving on, we've had a request to ask this question in particular, which is, what will you do to regain the trust of the Scottish Green Party so that the parties can work together again?
Yeah, so I've given this a lot of thought. I would say, without being complacent about the question, I already have a very good relationship with the Scottish Greens. I went to the conference at the time where the kind of split, for want of a better word, happened, to give a speech to talk about it. But my speech was very much not saying don't split. My speech was very much recognising why Scottish Greens felt this decision needed to happen. And I think, if I was to set measures of, if I become leader, what would success look like? One of those successes would be to rebuild trust with the Scottish Greens. And that's not just the MSPs, who I already have good relationships with, a lot of them, but crucially the membership too. And even more crucially than the membership, trans people who are in the membership, who feel that the Green Party of England and Wales have let them down. And I just say, I was about to say, let's be clear on this. I hate when politicians say, let's be clear. I'm trying to find another phrase. But anyway, the point being, I don't think anyone should shy away from either that trans members have been let down. I think there's been times where the party has equivocated or been too slow to challenge transphobia, to challenge misgendering and harassment. And the argument has always been that we need to be a broad church, but broad churches have walls, and I want to be a broad church too, but the walls have to stop at transphobia, have to stop at misgendering. And so I think Scottish Greens have demonstrated, and again, I think Scottish Greens wouldn't say they're perfect on this either. I don't think any political party is perfect, because transphobia, along with misogyny, racism, any form of hate crime, exists throughout our society. So of course it exists in political parties, and it's particularly difficult in political parties because of litigation, because of changing case law, because of the fact that a political party is at its essence about a challenge for power and struggle. And so these spaces can be really uncomfortable spaces. But I really hope during my leadership, both for the Scottish Greens, but arguably more important, or just as importantly for members in England and Wales and communities, I really hope and will work to make sure that there is no equivocation, and that transphobia is absolutely not acceptable either in our society and certainly not in the party.
That's pretty good. And with your campaign for Green parties, are you interested in campaigning for proportional representation or similar, as you might have seen as a smaller party?
So I'm a huge fan of proportional representation, and for years I was probably one of the people in politics who was speaking about it the most. It was quite obsessive. It almost became a running joke. One of the reasons that I'm talking about it less is not because my enthusiasm for it has lessened. I think it would be an absolute game changer. But to be frank, I think the Labour Party have slightly weaponized it. They often say things like, oh, the Green Party are great and you can vote for them when we have a change in voting system. But if you vote anything but Labour now, you're going to get Reform and Nigel Farage. And so the message I'm really keen for people to hear is, we've worked out how to win even under first past the post. And despite the fact it's unfair, and it is unfair, and despite the fact that it means we have to target specific seats, which I really don't like, because it means that lots of areas don't get the Green campaign that they deserve. That is also an obvious stepping stone to more green representation. And one of the first things we do with more green representation is change to proportional representation. So slightly nuanced answer there, because I'm still totally in favour of proportional representation. That hasn't changed for a second. If you said to me what's one of the single biggest things that I think would change British politics, it would be proportional representation. I don't often say that because we were just talking about eco-populism, and I don't think most people are thinking proportional representation is the thing I really need. They're thinking about their human rights, their healthcare, etc. But I really believe a change in the voting system would enable much better outcomes in all of those areas that people do really care about. So absolutely yes to proportional representation, but a more nuanced answer in how much we should talk about it.
No, definitely. It reminds me a bit of the Lib Dems' strategy in the last general election as well, from what I can recall. And it's just a bit of a random thing, but if the Lib Dems ever considered an electoral pact or that sort of aspect, would you consider it?
So pluralism runs throughout my politics and throughout the Green Party. In fact, I came from the Liberal Democrats, partly because of proportional representation, to be honest. At the time, the Lib Dems were talking about it lots and the Greens weren't. It wasn't until I met Natalie Bennett and I saw her in the 2015 leaders debate where she was talking about the importance of protections for refugees and people seeking asylum, particularly Syria at that time, that I then got into conversations where I was like, oh, the Greens really care about proportional representation too, and that felt like a good link. So yes, absolutely, to talking to other parties. In terms of coalitions and things like that, I think it's definitely way too early to talk about those things. And with the Liberal Democrats, I think so there's 72 Liberal Democrat MPs, and like that's a huge achievement. I would love 72 Green MPs, but I also think my kind of reading of the Lib Dems at the moment is talk about a broad church. Like I have no idea what the core of the Lib Dem project is. At this point, we have Ed Davey, who literally was part of writing the Orange Book, which was one of the kind of foundations for austerity. And then on lots of issues has just been very, very wishy-washy. I've just been in City Hall where we've just been voting on various things. And there was a motion around protecting the Green Belt. I spoke up about it, saying we absolutely need to build council houses, we absolutely need affordable and accessible homes, and we also need to protect nature. The Greenbelt is not the place to build. The place to build is on brownfield sites. And the only reason why anyone is talking about building on the Greenbelt is because private property developers have essentially created a developers charter with the Labour government. And so I stood on the chamber floor just about half an hour ago and made that speech. And the Lib Dems abstained. And I just thought, if you can't even stand up for nature and ecology, like I don't know what is liberal or democratic about you. So anyway, I don't, it's not a no to working with them, and it's not a no to working with the Labour Party, frankly, either. But I think the key lines already that are very clear to me is a wealth tax, because we need to tackle inequality in society, action on climate, because obviously that runs throughout everything the Green Party do, and that is a big part of tackling inequality too, and proportional representation for the reasons we were just saying.
So how would you go about increasing the influence of the Green Party and green policies in general? What do you think needs to happen for it to become a lot more popular?
So one of the slogans I've been talking about in this campaign, and I say slogan, but I'll break it down so it's not just a slogan, is bold leadership now. But if I take each of those words in turn, I think it answers this question. So bold is probably one of the most important words in that. Well, they're all important, but bold is about being really clear about what we stand for. And again, being really clear about what we stand against. And I think this is somewhere where the Green Party can absolutely lift our game and amplify particularly marginalized voices. Being bold about things means that sometimes you will upset groups of people. And I don't think you should ever run at upsetting groups of people. I think you should always be looking to build consensus and always looking to build agreement. But then there are places where you just have to have a clear line and be very clear about what your values are. And I think that comes to boldness. It's not equivocating, not triangulating, but actually being really clear about what the party stands for. And I really think, and this would ultimately be a calculation, but I think lots of our membership agree that when you're clear about what you stand for, even when people disagree, they still respect you and ultimately may still vote for you, because at least you're not doing what so many other political parties and politicians do, which is tell people what they want to hear. Instead, actually, there's just a very clear, this is what I stand for. When I talk about leadership, obviously I'm running to be leader of the Green Party, so that sounds like it's just about me, but I would mirror that up. Leadership is actually about everyone, everyone in the Green Party for now, but hopefully other people too. I'm really interested in the leadership that happens in our communities. So this isn't about being obsessed with Westminster or being obsessed with Parliament. Yes, I want to get more MPs there, but that's the beginning of the journey. The point is to win a Green government eventually and to hold power to transform our communities. But the start of that journey and the focus of that journey has to be on the communities themselves. They're the people who I meet all the time as I travel around the country who feel like politics has let them down or it hasn't really represented them. And sometimes, whether they hear me talk or, more importantly, they hear anyone from our party talk, particularly if they're from a marginalized group, and they go, actually, there is a place for me in politics. There's a space that I can carve out. And even though I've not seen or heard someone who looks or has my experience in politics, this is my moment to step up. There's lots of data for a campaign called Ask Her to Stand, hashtag Ask Her to Stand, which says if you ask a man to stand, on average, they're more likely the first or second time to go, yeah, sure, I'll do that, even if they don't have the relevant political experience. But if you ask a woman or someone who's non-binary, they're much more likely to need to be asked, I think, on average, 6 to 9 times. So Ask Her to Stand is encouraging everyone to speak to the people in their lives who might not be obvious politicians, in inverted commas, or people from marginalized groups to help them to get that first experience. Should also shout out a campaign group called Elect Her, who also support women and non-binary people with things like training and hustings. I think with money for transport if you're struggling for whatever reason to get to hustings and things like that. So Elect Her are a brilliant organisation.
No, definitely. I suppose on the note about the communities, as you mentioned, one of the big news stories that's come out is about communities and prides banning political parties from pride events across the country. Wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. I'm sorry, I'm the last one now, but now says, because I said bold leadership now speaks for itself. It's not about waiting around, it's doing it right now. The pride thing has really, I've got so many mixed emotions about it, so I will try and say all the mixed emotions and hope it congeals into an answer. The first thing is Pride in London, particularly, if I go for that specific Pride, has been problematic for a long time. As in the organisation, I'll come on to politicians, but the organisation itself has been problematic. I've been pushing for a long time at Sadiq Khan about some of the sponsors that they've accepted, included United Airlines that have links with obviously fossil fuel companies, but also questions I have about the deportation of LGBT refugees and migrants back to countries that aren't safe. Anyway, that sponsorship has been dropped, so I was starting to feel better about Pride in London. I guess when it was announced, I felt, and I'm just being honest now because I wish my response had been what my colleagues' response is, which I'll tell you about in a second. But my response was, why are you banning the Green Party? Like, the Labour Party have been pretty awful on this, and I think obviously the Tories have always been awful on this. And I can see why you'd ban them, but I feel like the Green Party has LGBT people's backs, including the trans communities. And my colleagues at City Hall kind of, just in a reflective conversation, said, we can always do more, right? And to be fair, I didn't challenge that. I immediately said, yes, we can always do more. And so then we decided between the three of us that actually, rather than push back with the Greens should be invited, we take this as an open call to reflect and go, actually, what more can we be doing? And let's make sure that we're doing more. I attend Trans Pride most years, certainly in the last few years. And actually, I don't know what their stance is yet, whether they're inviting politicians to walk with them or not. But I'm hoping to walk in Trans Pride to show my solidarity there. But in terms of Pride in London, or the prides that happen around the country, I think when an organisation that stands for liberation for LGBT people says the political system is failing us and political parties are failing us without exception, then I think it's incumbent on any politician to listen, to not be defensive, and for all of us, whether you're a politician or not, to go, actually, what more can we be doing? And by the way, I know some of more what I could be doing, and things like this podcast are helpful, actually, is I speak about this a fair bit if I'm fair to myself, but I think, we can always speak up more. We can always find times to keep raising the issue and challenging injustice.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting more into the LGB and particularly T questions right now. So what will you do to make your party a safe place for trans people in an increasingly unsafe country?
Yeah, so I guess there's 2 parts to that question. First of all, internal party culture in terms of what we specifically going to do in the party, and then a more kind of wider question, I guess, about the country. In terms of a party, I'm always looking. We have groups called liberation groups, which are the groups that represent specific interests or identities, and we have an LGBT QIA Green Party group, who are brilliant. In fact, I met with them recently, and I think a lot of it, and I don't mean get out their way in terms of not also take a proactive role in this and not also do my part in this, but I also think a huge part of this with any group actually is lifting the statements they are making and lifting their platform or amplifying their platform. And so I've been really proud of the work that they've done in the party to educate, to inform, to create spaces where people can gather, to provide solidarity spaces for people within our community and more specifically in the trans community to have space to vent, to be angry, to be upset, to show solidarity, whatever the emotion at the time. And so that's part one, I think, is to amplify and lift the voices. I think part two is to recognize that there have been times when I think the party have not been clear enough or fast enough to say what we think about things. So on the cash review, for instance, I think the fact that trans people were not included in the conversation in any meaningful way is something that should have been condemned from the moment the cash review came out. I think the voices of trans people, particularly trans academics, I met Natasha Kennedy just the other day. The party should be doing much more work to work with people who have expertise, particularly when it's expertise and lived experience, to go, what more can we be doing to again to amplify your voice, but also to align where our party policies align. I think more widely for the country, I think there's very obvious things which are, obviously the Green Party supports self-ID, but I think to be vocal about that right now is pretty important. To condemn, which to be fair, the party has done, I think, the EHRC, and also the politicization of that, which has been so damaging and so dangerous for people. I think around healthcare, there's a whole set of measures around gender affirming healthcare, completely unacceptable waiting lists, West Streetings, horrendous policies. A shout out to my colleague on the Assembly, Zoe Garbett, who's a Green Assembly member. She ran for Mayor of London. She used to work in the NHS, and actually when she was working in an NHS trust, she won an award for her LGBT work. And now that she's here in City Hall at the London Assembly, she has been doing what work she can around LGBT healthcare, particularly around things like is it trans broken leg syndrome or is it broken arm syndrome?
It's trans broken arm syndrome, aka
sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Same principle, aka diagnostic overshadowing. Yes.
There we go.
Sorry.
No, absolutely. But to raise awareness of that, and that was interesting actually on the Assembly floor a few years ago, because getting out of the kind of politicized conversations about trans medication and healthcare, which undoubtedly need to happen, but in the London Assembly we're cross-party, so you're always looking for consensus positions. But my other colleague, Caroline Russell, built a consensus position for trans healthcare in terms of just everyday healthcare. There was nothing to do with being trans, but actually the injustices that are so often faced through that as well. And so I think, that was a lot there that I said, but there's a lot to do. And then, sorry, I'm not even talked about the police force and the kind of erosion and mistrust around the relationship between the LGBT community, but particularly the trans community and the police. And obviously that is exacerbated if you're a trans person of colour as well, where injustices that are faced already are amplified and made even worse. And working with the police to both educate, to hold to account, but also make sure that there are strategies for hate crime that recognise that trans hate crime, as any form of hate crime, is its own form of hate crime, which comes with its own specific patterns, and to inform and educate the police force around that.
Oh, exactly. You also mentioned about uplifting trans voices inside of the party, but another angle inside of making the party more of a safe space for trans people is also confronting the transphobia when it is in the party. So when we've seen stories like Ashleigh Ali or other members like that, what is your plans in confronting that issue?
Yeah, I'm going to answer your question, but just a little bit I wanted to add in there because I thought it was something you were going to say and you didn't. But actually, I think there's something here too about uplifting cis women's voices as well who are being trans inclusive, because I think there's something there about people recognizing that people really do have their back. And again, I'm just talked about Caroline Russell, who held Sadiq Khan to account the other day in the chamber, and I found it quite a powerful moment. Because Sadiq Khan on some social issues has been very vocal and proactive, and that's good, particularly I'd say on things like migration. But around the Supreme Court judgment and the EHRC, just absolutely silent on this and silent on pride. And she asked him a question the other day, and his response, I don't want to mischaracterize, was not the worst response in the world. I think it was a bad response, and it's not a response I would have given, and it's not a response I think any progressive politician should have given, but it wasn't kind of actively an awful response, but it was quite both sidesy. And I just thought it was particularly powerful to have Caroline, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, but as an older woman, speaking up for the trans community and being very clear that her inclusive feminism obviously includes trans women too. And I just think the more that those voices can be uplifted, particularly alongside trans women, to recognize that the struggle, people who are in it together, obviously having different experiences, but they're in it together, feels powerful. Okay, coming on to your question directly. This is a more difficult question to answer because one of the learnings from Jeremy Corbyn's time running the Labour Party, this was around anti-Semitism, and so not transphobia, but to match it across, was around leaders of political parties not getting involved with disciplinary processes and them not being politicized. So it absolutely has to be a separate and independent process. So very often, and it's probably one of the things I find hardest to deal with as deputy leader. And if I'm leader, I have no doubt it's going to get worse. And when I say hard, I just mean emotionally on me, because people contact me with something terrible that something said, whether that's a tweet or something they've heard in an interview, and they say, why are you not kicking this person out right now? And if I was in charge of the disciplinary process, which I don't think I should be, but let's imagine an alternative world and I would have no doubt to go very quickly. I don't need much of an investigation. This person needs to leave the party. They do not represent the values of the party if they're being transphobic. What actually has to happen in reality is, one, people have to report it. So very often people see something and there's kind of a bystander effect. They presume like 100 people else have reported it because it's egregious. But actually, from what I understand, sometimes these things just don't go reported. I'm not victim blaming or survivor blaming anyone there, because I can understand particularly if you are trans, you can go, I'm already dealing with lots and I don't want to then get involved with this disciplinary complaint. So I'm partly talking to allies there as well, who I'm sure listen to this podcast. But for anyone to know to report things is really important. I think second, there are mediation processes in the party rather than going straight to complaints and disciplinary. Again, I'm aware I'm saying this from some element of privilege, that if people are trying to erase your identity or not recognizing your basic dignity or human rights, going into mediation can feel incredibly unsafe. So I'm definitely not blaming or saying to anyone that you must go to mediation. What I am saying, though, is if anyone, particularly if they're an ally again, and feels like they can, whilst recognizing if you're an ally, you can't speak for a trans person, and no trans person can speak for all trans people, but obviously they're speaking from a different perspective, then to be able to have mediation, for me, feels like that will create a better party culture where we're not at each other's throats, in terms of we recognize people can make mistakes, people can be informed in ways. Misgendering, I think, is a particularly kind of thorny area here, where I'm sure you won't mind me saying that I think people do misgender people sometimes, as do I, in terms of a mistake can happen. But there's a very, very clear difference between someone making a mistake, immediately owning it when corrected, apologizing and moving on, and people repetitively making the same mistake, which starts to look ignorant at best and at worst is hateful, and I would say a hate crime. And so, the mediation is that spot there. And I recognize sometimes mediation won't work. And so then you need to go into complaint system. And then I think for that, our disciplinary volunteers do a phenomenal job, because they get shouted at, I think, from people who think all sorts of things. And I think, if I'm honest, some of that reveals that they're probably doing their job, in terms of sometimes people will agree with decisions they've made and sometimes people will disagree with decisions they've made. But in terms of being in leadership, I see my principal role actually to make sure that they are not getting pressure either from me or anyone in political or elected office, because actually fundamentally people have to trust the disciplinary system and the complaint system, and that can only happen if they are genuinely independent. So I don't sound like, though, that's a fob off, because that sounds a little bit like, well, just complaints do it. I think there are other things, though, that I can do as leader, which is, I'm repeating myself a little bit now, but I think it's important to be clear what is and isn't acceptable behaviour. And I suppose we'll get into more of the weeds of this now, but a few years ago, I was asked about if gender critical people were welcome in the party. And this is a very difficult conversation to have because of case law now saying that gender critical beliefs are worthy of respect, although even that becomes a bit more nuanced in a political party. But because case law is still not entirely clear, what is very clear to me is transphobia is not acceptable in the party, and misgendering is harassment, and that's transphobia. And so I said, if someone's transphobic, then they're not welcome in the Green Party. And then a very small group of people, I see them pop up online, who describe themselves as gender critical, said that I said they're not welcome in the party. And I think they're telling on themselves then, because they're saying they're gender critical, but I've been really clear that transphobia is not welcome in the party. So there's a real legitimate and burning question if you can be gender critical without being transphobic. And I don't have an easy answer to that. I think that's a more complex question. But I think if those people who say they're gender critical feel excluded because their transphobia is not allowed in the party, then I think the choice there becomes clear for the disciplinary system. But it's up to them.
True. So I was just going to say, I think Alex and I and the rest of the podcast team, we have a short answer for that, but we're not in a political party, so we can be a little bit more direct about how we say things.
Well, I can be more direct. I think, I have not yet heard. Well, no, what I was about to say, and I'm not going to say this because I'm going to qualify it, but I will tell you what I was about to say because I always just want to be honest in my thoughts. I've not yet met someone who claims to be gender critical who hasn't, after a few questions, said something problematic where you go, well, that's not gender critical, that's transphobic. That being said, I have met people who have described themselves to me as gender critical, and then I've got into a conversation with them, and I don't think they're gender critical by the definition of what gender critical means. I think there's someone who has had concerns about women's spaces, but then as soon as you get into the fact that a trans woman in a cis woman space there's literally no evidence, and in fact it is transphobic to suggest that they are going to be any more of a threat, then becomes highly problematic. But then they hear this, and then when you talk about the real threat is cis men in spaces and predatory men, then you get into this conversation, and then suddenly they go, well, no, I agree with all of that, and then you go, well, you're not being gender critical, then you're just being concerned. And I know that the word concerned can also be triggering, particularly for trans people. And so I'm not trying to legitimize that word either. I guess I'm just trying to be more nuanced in the approach. So, yes, I can see how you can have a shorter answer and you're not in a political party, so that's easier. I also think that there is space, and again, I caveat this with the privilege to have this space, to not assume when people use phrases or words that they always know what those phrases or words mean, or that we all have the same understanding of what that word or phrase means. And what I don't want to do is push people away because they've heard the phrase gender critical and think it describes them. But when then you get to their views, actually you go, no, well, there's no real difference there in what trans people themselves are literally saying. I guess the biological sex point is one here, right? That as far as I understand it, no one is ever saying, oh, I can change my biological sex, other than a few outlier cases, which again we can discuss. But actually, that trans people, as far as I know, have always said sex and gender are different things, and they were actually conflated by people who were trying to confuse and obfuscate the whole conversation.
So moving slightly away then from kind of figures within the party, how will your party lead the fight against the institutionalized transphobia in this country?
Yeah, so I think some of the measures I was talking about earlier around healthcare and policing, I think that kind of is looking at the systemic approach. I suppose if I answer this question more widely, though, I think the institutionalized transphobia is coming from the media. I can give an experience of this the other day where I was on the Jeremy Vine show, and it was my first time on the show, and one of the first questions was the kind of what is a woman conversation. Yeah. And the first place I went to, and it was out of allyship with the trans community, was to point out that the things that I wanted to come on the show and talk about were inequality, healthcare, the NHS, housing. because I know these are also things trans people care about, and they'd much rather I was talking about these things than engaging in culture war conversations about what is a woman. I should say, by the way, that I also made very clear within all of this that trans rights are human rights. So it wasn't a dodge of a question. It was just saying this is not up for negotiation. Human rights are fundamental, and let's talk about the things that matter to everyone, which is healthcare, inequality, etc. And then I got asked again, what is a woman? And I basically said that's up for the woman to define, and it's not for me as a cis man to start telling people what they identify or don't identify as. And then Jeremy Vine said to me, why do you keep talking about this stuff? And I was just like, you couldn't have a more concrete example of the fact that I've come on the show. I've dealt with the question quickly and gone, let's move on to the things that everyone cares about, including trans people, and not this culture war nonsense. And you're now asking me why I keep bringing it up when I'm literally not the one who's bringing it up. So I think calling the media out on that and being really aware that I think again so when I met Natasha Kennedy the other day, she'd just been on a panel talking about media reform, and she was talking about being very clear how transphobia has come as a top-down approach from the elite to split and divide people and distract us. And I don't think any of this is a conspiracy theory, because we know Steve Bannon, who worked for Donald Trump, literally said that, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something around trans rights, or the trans debate, again, inverted commas, being a way to split the left and create division. So I think we all need to have our eyes. I know, speaking to you both, it's ironic for me to say have your eyes open on it, because you obviously are. But I mean, for everyone who cares about human rights and cares about marginalized groups. And I don't think it's, I'm not trans erasure here, but I think it's also not just trans people. We know it's migrants, we know it's disabled people, we know it's people of color, we know it's lots of different and intersecting groups. And to recognize that actually when they come for one of us, they come for all of us. And although all of these groups have individual protected characteristics that need different conversations, I think what it ultimately needs above everything is solidarity, and for us all to be together and to not allow division to part us. So I think media reform is a big part of it. What does that look like? It looks like holding the media making them transparent and accountable. Just 3 companies of multimillionaires and billionaires own 90% of the country's media. So it's not a surprise that this just gets infested constantly in the conversation. And then I think more widely, politics as well as media, making sure that when we're electing people, people are checking what their stances are on a whole range of things. But that includes having progressive stances towards LGBT community, in particular trans people.
Yeah, I suppose when we were talking about the media interviews, I was thinking it's probably a change for once that someone's not saying, why aren't you more transphobic?
Yeah, quite.
Yes, and I suppose a thing that's been dominating for media lately has been the Supreme Court judgment. And what was your stance on that?
So, I mean, my stance was to be horrified with Keir Starmer in his kind of sense of, well, the court has spoken, so now this is what needs to happen, which is a complete misunderstanding of, yes, you need to respect the fact the Supreme Court has a process, but the Supreme Court is ultimately there to make decisions that are political decisions and made by politicians. And so my stance on it is that those of us in politics who are there to show, amongst many things, inclusivity towards the LGBT community, and again, particularly towards trans people, have been losing that discussion and need to step up efforts and need to build consensus and need to work to build the case. Because yes, I can give the answer that it's horrifying to see Keir Starmer do that, but we know unless we start to step up the campaign, I don't come here to fearmonger, and I know that anyone listening to this is probably scared already. But this can get worse. And I say that with, a feeling, a pit in my stomach. I guess to give some hope, I say it can get worse. I think this with a lot of things. Like, the only thing that cannot maintain right now is the status quo of our politics, of the media, of our society right now. And we're going to go one of 2 ways, and we can go the way of America. And I would say we're set in some ways to go to the ways of America, which is a spiral towards fascism, where the people who are facing the worst brunt of hate crime, and that absolutely is trans people. It's a really fearful future, but I don't think we need to go that way, and nor are we destined to go that way. I think when we organise, when we campaign, when we work together, we can have a more hopeful, positive vision of society where ultimately I think if we do solve people's material conditions, I don't think people are raised or not raised, sorry, I don't think people are born implicitly or explicitly transphobic or homophobic or racist. I think scarcity and a media propaganda that's aligned with a political propaganda pushes people into those positions to hate the other and to hate the marginalized rather than recognizing it's multimillionaires and billionaires that are screwing people over, and it's certainly not trans people. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, but it's for a position that has been repeated enough times that people feel like they're losing something because trans people are getting basic dignity and healthcare in order to be able to live and to survive. And so that kind of the alternative approach, I think, it shouldn't just be about surviving for trans people as well. It's about trans joy. It's about trans celebration. It's about not tolerance. It's about actually flourishing in our society. And not to compare the two things, but a disabled person asked me the other day about my policies for disabled people. And the first answer I gave was to challenge the cut in PIP payments. And then they interrupted me legitimately and said, well, it's not just about opposing cuts, though. It's about building a better life for disabled people. And I absolutely agree and was going to get there. But I also think that around trans people too, that our policies can't just be about basic survival, although I understand they need to be now. But actually, there should be a vision in which trans people absolutely feel like they have every opportunity in society too. And it's not just about getting by, but actually about flourishing and, again, celebrating trans joy. So in terms of, I can't remember where I got here, but how to challenge fascism, I think I mean, that's literally why I'm running for leader of the Green Party. And it's not just about me. And by the way, I guess this is where I plug that if anyone joins the Green Party by July 31st, you get a vote in this leadership election. But I also recognize it's never going to come from one person. And it's never going to come from the top down. This is ultimately about people in their communities, whether it's talking to friends or neighbors, having these conversations, particularly around trans people, and where people have the bandwidth to do it. And it absolutely cannot fall on trans people to do this, apart from where they feel like they're able to. And it's most powerful, I think, if someone has lived experience, to correct misinformation, to challenge lies. I suppose where I don't have an easy answer, and I'd be interested in your reflections, is the people I see this do best are my friends who are trans, who can maintain patience and seem to have unlimited patience for dealing with nonsense, but always come at it as if a person's coming from good faith. And actually, I've seen times that they've turned people around. But I also recognize it cannot be for trans people to have to keep legitimizing their existence. And if people are annoyed or upset, that is also perfectly legitimate. I do wonder, though, how can we encourage or create spaces where trans people in particular can be encouraged to have the patience where they feel like they're able to, because I think I've seen nothing more powerful than when someone with the lived experience goes, I'm not judging you, and I'm not even going to challenge you in opposition. I'm just going to sit here and listen, and then very calmly and cleverly explain why you're wrong. And then when that turns people around, I think that is ultimately the solution. But I also totally recognize that can't fall on trans people to do.
It's I started out my media, let's call it a career, with that in mind, like wanting to meet people where they're at and consistently kind of approach from a point of good faith. But you get what I found, I got very, very, very sick of answering literally the same questions. And it was the same questions pushed by, as you've already pointed out, pushed by a media machine which has been so captured by, oligarchs, basically, that's kind of pushing their agenda. And I got asked once, I got a phone call from a BBC regional journalist, and one of the questions he asked me was, so toilets, are they a big issue in the trans community then? No, they're not. We just want to pee. It's you lot who keep obsessing about toilets. And so just to say, as a transgender woman who's also in a wheelchair, I appreciate what you said about disability rights. You're absolutely right. Okay, so I guess getting a bit closer to home, Adrian Ramsey says that the ruling from the Supreme Court brought clarity. Do you agree?
No, I think it has I mean, objectively, no matter even what you think about any of these things, you can see it's not caused clarity. It's caused even more confusion. Um, the EHRC on top of that, I think, has created even more questions. And I think, I mean, if I'm being as fair as I can to the Supreme Court, they did say very clearly that this should not be used as a ruling to discriminate, or I can't remember the exact words, or to create prejudice towards trans people. And then it was actually, I think, the BBC and media organisations that so badly reported on what had even been said that the runaway train very quickly caused even more confusion. So if, I'm being fair to the Supreme Court, I don't think the confusion was necessarily caused by the Supreme Court judgment in and of itself. It was caused by the extremely bad reporting of it. However, the Supreme Court judgment had enough wide open space and ambiguity in it that this has created the forum for which the media, and I would say bad faith actors, just to call it what it is, in fact, worse than that, worse than bad faith actors, and bigots, very wealthy bigots who happen to be children's authors who could have enjoyed a quiet life being a celebrated children's author, but instead have chosen nothing but hate and division for seemingly no reason other than they just seem to hate trans people. The Supreme Court judgment, though, clearly created that space in which that was able to do that, rather than actually providing clarity or providing compassion and dignity. A court's role is to provide process and to provide clarity, but I also think it's anyone's role who wants to see a better society, which is presumably what a court is doing, to look to values of compassion and dignity and solidarity, and it provided none of that. It just seemed to cause more division.
No, definitely. And I suppose sticking on the topic of when we were talking about Adrian Ramsey again, for another court case, he was seen as saying that the Green Party members who hold anti-trans views should not be expelled, saying that they have the right to express that view. What's your stance on this suggestion?
Yeah, no one has the right to express transphobia. Well, let me rephrase. No one has the right within the Green Party to express transphobia. No one has the right in society either. It's a hate crime. But obviously, as the leader of a political party, it's not my job to rule over hate crime. Well, I guess let me rephrase all of that. Being too nuanced about it. No one has the right to express transphobia. End of sentence. Actually, I say end of sentence. No one has the right to express transphobia without consequence. I guess anyone has the right to express hate crime, but also if if you're arrested or sent to prison for it, then
that's a consequence.
Hate speech comes with responsibility, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so final question. Now, a lot of trans people believe that banning puberty blockers for only trans children is, in fact, state-sanctioned conversion therapy. How do you feel about this, and is your party willing to call it out as such?
I think the very first place to start with here is that this should be led by healthcare experts and by particularly trans healthcare experts. And from what I understand, they're very clear that this is equivalent to conversion therapy, because there are examples where young people will need puberty blockers in order to avoid... I won't finish that sentence without a trigger warning, but I think people know what I'm saying there. The idea, though, that this should be for the health secretary, for Wes Streeting to decide, even if you took what he's done in good faith, which I don't, by the way, but even if you did, for him to think that rather than give health professionals, particularly people who are experts in trans healthcare, rather than them having the choice about what should happen at any particular scenario that is bespoke on the individual circumstances, but it's better for a politician to do it, is absolutely absurd, whether that's trans healthcare, whether that's disabled people's healthcare, whether it's healthcare for asthma, quite frankly, whatever it is. I want healthcare decisions to be made by a healthcare expert, particularly an expert in whatever the specific healthcare discussion is, and not a politician. And I think also to see the Labour Party or the Labour government at this point not clearly speak out against conversion therapy is a deeply worrying step. it's a little bit of a cliche because it's been said so many times, but I also think it's important to say, as a gay man who grew up in school while Section 28 was going on, I felt, even now later on in life, where I'm a proud gay man, you still, amongst myself and other people, you hear the shame come out sometimes, or just the kind of phrases or words where you go, wow, that was deep rooted there from growing up, where these things weren't discussed. And again, the kind of lack of trans education in schools, or the movement towards not allowing trans people's existence to even be acknowledged. I know this is slightly different to the question you're asking me about puberty blockers, but I think it all speaks to Wes Streeting seemingly passing on this narrative that for a young trans person, or a young person at all, to know that trans people exist is in some way confusing them, or in some ways not allowing them to have the experiences that would be healthy and conducive to a good life later on, is all indicative of a institutionalized, insipid transphobia. And actually, in the Green Party, we believe that 16-year-olds should be able to vote, that they have the right, the intelligence, and the knowledge to know what political party should be running this country and making key decisions around things that affect all of our lives. So then the idea that at 16 they wouldn't be able to have an informed conversation with an informed healthcare professional seems both patronizing at best and at worst dangerous.
It's all pretty good.
Yeah. Zach Polanski, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. I guess just at the end of the show, I want to say that, I feel pretty informed on all of these things, both from being in the LGBT community, both frankly from having trans friends and meeting trans experts and academics, but I'm also always aware that there's more to learn and there's more to discover. So I both say with me, but in fact, any politician who's working to get better at this, please, one, be gentle with us, because there's always things to learn, but two, also inform us and educate us. And I'm always really willing to hear more and learn more. So thanks for having me on the show. But I'm aware that I've been doing a lot of the talking, and actually I'm always really keen to listen and then hear from people's experiences.
No, definitely. I think a while back we saw that you liked a couple of our tweets a while back, so it seems you've been listening quite well from what we've been seeing.
Indeed. Well, we try and keep people informed. That's kind of what we see us. We've carved out a niche with that, I think. So if we can keep some other people informed as well, fantastic. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for the podcast. I really, when I talk about communities and education and conversation, obviously a podcast is a huge way to do that on a mass scale. So yeah, thank you for what you're contributing.
So, what did you make of Mr. Polanski?
He knew that we didn't have a lot of time to go over a lot of stuff, and he made sure to speed up how quickly he spoke, specifically to address everything we're talking about. He seemed to be really informed on trans rights as well. I was really trying hard to find some issues. There was one or two gripes, but nothing that really stood out.
Same, honestly. It was quite refreshing to interview somebody in the political sphere who knew what he was talking about and didn't kind of, in terms of, he knew the parlance. He didn't use any old clunky phrases like trans-identified people, like that Lib Dem guy did at the Parliament event a few weeks back. No clunky phrasing. He was on it and he knew the stuff, and he's obviously done a certain amount of research into it.
Even corrected me on something as well.
Oh, he did, yeah. But I mean, as a gay guy, he's presumably a little bit closer to the LGBT community. I think he mentioned having trans friends, so that's gonna help. But that in itself is a breath of fresh air. A politician who knows the shit, isn't afraid to say it, and frankly, I'm good for anybody who advocates for a wealth tax.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I got to say, if I was a Green Party member, I will admit I think I would vote for him.
So, that's our episode. Except one thing remains. Let's talk about some trans joy, shall we?
Now we're on the upwards trajectory to optimism. We're on to some people having some joy.
Yeah.
Thank you for our Discord yet again.
So Bex says, so I'm now 2 months on estrogen, I'm definitely getting breast growth, and best of all, I'm about to graduate from university, and I can't wait to wear a dress and heels at graduation. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, congratulations. And following on that, Ceres on Tuesday said it will be a year on HRT, and when I had my bloods taken for my next endo appointment, the first thing the nurse did say was how jealous of my hair she was.
Yeah. Creature of the Hill says, coming up to the Big Gold Turd, which is a hotel in Edinburgh. It is, I looked it up. And there is a group just behind us being directed by one of them that was a local. She says to them, we need to not go into the building, but up the slope beside it, the same way we are going to get to the bus station. At which point the bloke directly behind us comments, when he is a little indecisive, but I don't want to cut up the big scary lesbian. Yeah, always nice to hear you perceived as a big scary lesbian.
Oh yeah. So, and following that, Janusz, he's had his top surgery booked for August. The trans guy one. So, congratulations.
Amy said, had a professional headshot taken for upcoming debut theatre performance. Super excited now. Show is in like a week and a half, and it's Abigail Thorne's The Prince at the Lace Market Theatre in Nottingham. Fantastic. That's a great play to be in, and I hope it goes well.
Exactly.
And yeah, having the headshots done must have been quite validating, really. So yeah, well done, and I hope it goes well.
Definitely. A long-time friend of the show, Benjamilian, said, "Liz, my trans computer game, which I've been working on for yonks, is finally emerging on St. Swithin's Day, this coming Tuesday. Its whole aim is to bring trans joy or gender gladness, GGs, with new friendships, petting animals, playing instruments, and optionally hormones as a source. Trans theft also, if you'll pardon the self-promo." Yes, I saw a little trailer for this that Ben put in place. We'll put a little clip on it because it's such a lovely little trailer.
Yeah.
They do such good music for it.
So, Tony Widmo says, I have been contacted by Brighton Clinic regarding my SRS. They just want my details, BMI and GP medical summary, but that's progress at least. Also, I now have a perm and mouse ears, and I think they make me look cute AF, and we can confirm, yes, they do.
And Melissa Poulton, they were speaking at full council dressed up as she wanted to, and looking killer with a wig Flint would approve of. It was very good.
Yeah, it was. Kaboo was the keynote speaker talking about the science of gender diversity at the Southwest Educational Psychology Conference in Devon on Tuesday. 140 professional psychologists all working together to make an education system where everyone can find a place to belong. That's fucking great, that. Love it.
Brilliant. Following that, Jay Woods, odd one on trans joy / pain. Next Wednesday, I'm running a marathon, but it's a word marathon. 24 hours of writing, a 50k word goal. And this is in response to the Kent book ban and to raise funds for the Transpire Southend. It's going to be streamed and all can join and try to get sponsored or just for fun. You don't have to do 24 hours or 50,000 words. It's whatever you fancy. And fighting fascism with a word marathon. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Love it. So, Fungal Art Person, hello darling, said, I got some cute clothes and stickers and accessories well on the way to maximising cuteness per mushroom. Good.
Or CPM. That's a nice little measurement there. So, next is Seines. They recently organised a conference of what is a queer experience in mathematics at Loughborough University. It was really invigorating hearing plenty of provocations, highlighting issues facing the trans and broader community with plenty of actions to spur us on. It was really good to see a wide range of age groups represented too, and it's also good to learn just how supportive one of our learned societies, the London Mathematical Society, are. And they're formulating a trans inclusion statement to release in the near future. So hopefully that goes well.
Here's Sarah S., who pretty sure I know who that is, saying Trans Pride Brighton has had its best fundraising month in our history after an 80s pop star who wants to remain anonymous donated a life-changing amount of money to us. Fan-fucking-tastic.
Oh yeah, I listen to way too much 80s stuff, so it would be funny if I listened to them on the regular.
I'm not sure there's such a thing as too much 80s stuff, to be honest, but then...
That's very true.
I was born in the 80s, I remember certain parts of it, so, you know. Anyway.
So following that is Chris. So my husband's gender-affirming care fundraiser was funded in less than 24 hours. And we're now aiming for a stretch goal of funding his top surgery for the rest of the months. Congratulations.
Yeah. And Ashleigh, obviously not me, says, I'm enjoying the heat for the first time since I actually like most of my body now. Awesome. Good feeling.
Onwards to something that's the opposite of the heat. Make it rain. So for the first time, I got euphoria while looking in a mirror. An actual happy euphoria buzz. I haven't felt like that before. So, that is wonderful and so happy for you.
It's good. It's really good. Good feeling. Can confirm. Min says, had super gay nails done in advance of Bristol Pride this weekend, and I'm so happy how they came out, giving me all the euphorias. And yeah, they are rainbow as fuck. I love them.
And next is our favourite Crazy Richard. So Richard was on a parade at London Pride, and it was awesome. This is our Crazy Richard and Crazy Chloe London Pride Parade photo.
Yep. Yeah. So they've included a photo, and obviously they look gay as hell, and I sort of thoroughly approve it. So Lily says, it's coming up to a year of me on HRT. Started at Trans Pride London last year. Awesome. Good milestone, Lily.
Congratulations, babes. And next up is Olivia. I was away on a camping trip all weekend with my all-female only motorbike group. As much as I've been with the group for a few years, it's always refreshing to be reminded how much people value for me and just have a good time while we try and make sure everyone feels included and loved, regardless of where we all sit. Cis, het or LGBT, etc. We went up to the top of a Cairngorm funicular while swimming in Loch Inch and riding on quad bikes, and would recommend a trip to Dalraddy. I almost read that as Dal Daddy or something. A trip to Dalraddy holiday parks. No, it's windy when you go to the top of a mountain. Hair doesn't like being as free when you do that. Lol.
Yeah, I had a good holiday in Scotland, like in 2016. It was lovely. And Jamie says, I have the 3rd anniversary of my legal name change coming up in a matter of days. Here's the very happy and excited vid I made when I got home from the local sheriff's court. And yes, on this video, the excitement is palpable and it's lovely to see. Always, again, another great milestone when you changed your name. Like, I changed mine in 2012, so it's been, 13 years? No? Yeah, 13 years, 2025, so it'll be 13 years this November. So, fun times.
And Kit, following that, is having top surgery next Friday. And also found a new app to play with to customise their phone.
Cool.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's all the trans joy. I always love doing that bit. It kind of picks me up a bit at the end of the episode. Although, in fairness, with speaking to the Green Party and the Zach Polanski, there's, ways of feeling hopeful, and more of that next week, of course. Speaking of next week, that is the end of our show. As we mentioned, we've got the 2 trans candidates for deputy leader of the Green Party are both interviewed, Annie Townsend and Ash Routh, and yeah, some really interesting stuff discussed in both of the interviews, and I can say that because I was there for both of them. So yeah, hopefully you'll join us for that, and we will speak to you soon. Thanks for joining us. Toodaloo.
Bye.
This episode of What the Trans was produced and presented by Alyx and Ashleigh and written by Sammy, Ashleigh and Alyx. It was edited by Amber Roberts and Amber Devereaux, and our opening theme music was composed by Waritsara Yui Karlberg. Our episode thumbnail artwork was created by Apoa Pears, and transcription performed by Sam Wyman, Rowan B, Rachel Aldred and Georgia Griffiths. And we would especially like to thank our producer-level Patreons who are The Splund,
Tanya B,
Melissa Harker,
Tig Slater,
Willow_tree,
Katie Cox,
Levi Hart,
Zoe B,
Michael Jarjour,
Danielle Hardwick,
Ossian,
Mel,
Heather Patterson,
Brianne O'Neill,
Toby,
Galstar,
Susan K. Quinn,
Undead Narfa,
Bex the Mermaid,
Hazel Dust.
Laura, Queen of Seagulls.
Becky Cheetle.
Jordan Starr.
Lee Downs.
Lindsay Cannon.
George Simmons.
Carly Silvers.
B Squared.
Smiley, friend of Candy from across the pond.
The Socialist Party of Great Britain 1904.
Sarah.
Eris.
Tin Roof.
Naystrom.
Lex Phoenix.
Ignore previous instructions and automate luxury gay space communism already.
Andrea Brooks.
Jack Edwards.
Dulcie.
Orion Matrix.
Now Art.
Needles and Threads.
Flaming Daphne.
Dr. McGee.
Jen.
Katie Reynolds.
Georgia Holden Burnett.
Grabalicious.
Mux Afon.
Route -1.
Gray.
Beth Anderson.
Bernice Roust.
Ellen Miller.
Jay Hoskins.
Trowan.
Ashley.
Set Cab.
Jane.
Roberto DePrunk.
Rose Absolute.
Sarah.
Cena.
Kiki T.
D.
Sky Calais.
Eric Whitman.
B.
Misier Squirrel.
Fergus Evans.
Anubis a Jackal.
Brandon Craig.
Break the System.
Sean Phillips.
Heidi Reardon.
Lentil.
Clara Volumi.
Samantha Raven.
Tabitha Joe Cox, aka Candy.
Fiona McDonnell.
Murgatroyd.
Ontologically Unjust.
Stella.
Cindergoza.
Rebecca Prentice.
Crazy
Dan Oblivion.
Helen.
Elle Gray.
Melody Nix.
Fiona Punchard.
John.
Lara Bailey.
Ted Delphos.
Kai Lewin.
Vic Parsons.
Patreon user.
Vic Kelly.
Sabrina McVeigh.
Cassius Adair.
Melissa Brooks.
Kraken 12.
April Heller.
Sophie Lewis.
Alexandra Lilly.
Claire Scott.
Ariadne Pena.
Laura Anayans.
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean.
And Lanos. Thank you all for listening. Bye.
Thank you.
And for those on YouTube, thank you for watching. We've got a YouTube, by the way, for those who might want to watch on there.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that the editors will have cut from before that, and if not, they should do.